Welcome to our second Saathi Samvaad. This one is on the impact of plastics on the environment and touching on climate change. And we have with us Sayesha Dogra. Sayesha is an adventurer whose last trip was to Antarctica, where she went to study climate change in what's known as the world's most fragile ecosystem. She and I got the chance to speak a little earlier, and her expedition to Antarctica was a bit of an inflection point in her career. And she spends a lot of time now trying to understand climate change, but also gather a group of people who are interested in this. She does this through an offline community of environmental enthusiasts called the Climate Party. And she also has her own series of weekly publications called Anti-Climatic. I absolutely love the name. The goal of it is to simplify climate change and environmental issues in a more easy to understand and fathom way. And she does this through using humor and real life examples. So obviously, I think that said it, but I'm very, very excited to have you today and talk about everything from climate. And I'm not a pro in this topic. I really want to understand and learn more. So hopefully, if the audience doesn't get anything out of it, at least hopefully I do. Before we get started, I want to set the scene for the audience. And I try to gather a little few of the stats that I have read about during my time working with Saathi. Single-use disposable sanitary pads are about 90% plastic, the rest of which can be cotton or an absorbent material. And 90% plastic in a sanitary pad is approximately 4 plastic bags. And these plastic bags usually take about 600 to 700 years to decompose. So if you think about India and its population of menstruators, India has approximately 12 billion sanitary pads getting used every year, which accounts for almost 1 million tons of plastic waste coming out of one country in 1 year. Saathi's compostable sanitary pads are made out of banana fibers, which makes them 100% compostable. They biodegrade completely, including their packaging, which some of it may look like plastic, but everything decomposes within 6 months. The reason I'm sharing all of this is, hopefully if we understand how bad plastic and we understand where that's coming from, we can be more conscious as consumers in making changes to our lifestyle that are important going forward in the future. So that's my little spiel. So Sayesha, let's get started. Your trip to Antarctica and kind of what did you learn there and any awakenings that you want to share with us?
For me, the idea of going to Antarctica first came about when I knew somebody who had been there somewhere in 2017. And at a personal level, I've always been interested in reducing waste. While I did not do anything particularly at a massive scale, but at a community level and at a personal level, I've been doing it. So that is how, the idea of applying to be a part of a program which could take me to Antarctica came about. So this particular program called Leadership on the Edge is led by Sir Robert Swan, who's the first person on Earth to have walked to both poles.
Oh, wow.
The whole idea is to kind of, as you mentioned in my intro, is to kind of get people to learn about climate change in the most fragile ecosystem on the Earth. There, of course, the idea of being in Antarctica, one of the most exclusive places on Earth, was of course bedazzling, and that's why I and a lot of people I went with call it a journey of a lifetime. Of course, I think I for the first time got to experience climate change firsthand. So, sharing a small example, while it was snowing most of the time as it should, on our return journey, we actually saw rain fall down instead of snow. So while that does happen at a very rare occasion, that is something we saw that happen right in front of us. And this was beyond what we were kind of really told about the glaciers that we saw there, right? Which had retreated over the last few years, and the retreat was quite massive. So the idea of experiencing something that you've been reading about firsthand has a very, very profound impact. And I guess that is what happened with me when I came back and felt a little lost coming back to the real world. And, the idea of having a new sense of purpose kind of came about to me.
That lead you to start Anti-Climatic?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that kind of started my whole journey into pursuing climate change full time. And that is how Anti-Climatic and the Climate Party are just offshoots of my journey, which I've just begun, I would say.
Before this started, I got a chance to read some of the stuff, and I would highly encourage everyone to kind of read what Sayesha's put out there. it's so easy to understand what you're saying, but it's also so impactful without trivializing the science behind any of it. So since you're the expert, let's kind of start at the roots and talk a little bit about the creation of plastic before we get into all the bad ways it affects us after getting created. How is plastic created at a high level? And what can you talk about emissions, or like what's happening in the creation of plastics which is bad for the environment?
Got it. For everyone who's watching, I'd like to, start with a caveat. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but at a very high level, talking about where and how the plastic comes from. So, at the very basic level, plastic is generated using crude oil or natural gas or coal, which is essentially all your non-renewable resources or fossil fuels, as we call them, right? Now, this process of creating plastic from all these materials is energy intensive, right? So, at the very basic level, it does add a lot of greenhouse gas emissions in the process. So, an estimate that I read said, the whole process of creation of plastic adds about 1.8 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions
Wow.
annually. In addition to this carbon footprint, what also happens is a loss of biodiversity, or I would say an adverse impact on biodiversity through air pollution. And so when the plastic is getting created, right, it's all chemicals, it's synthetic. So a lot of toxic gases get released in the process. And while this particular manufacturing of plastic is also happening, what happens is, since it is in the form of pellets, right, small particles, there is also a high chance of them leaking into water bodies, which kind of washes away into the larger oceans, thus harming marine ecosystems.
Okay. Got it. I was reading that approximately there are 400 tons of plastic that are produced each year. Out of this, approximately less than 10% actually gets recycled after use. 30% continues to stay in the economy, whether the useful life or the after the useful life of the product. And then the remainder 60% ends up in landfills and water bodies. So if we think about this 60% that ends up in landfills and water bodies, what happens to the plastic there, and how does it impact, whether that's marine life or vegetation? I've also heard that it converts to microplastics. So if we think about all of that, what's happening with that 60% of plastic?
So for everybody who may not be aware, so landfill is essentially a dumping ground for untreated waste, right? So plastic that has not gotten a chance to either be reused or recycled ends up there. So it is essentially plastic we didn't care about at all. Now what happens is, just like any other material in nature, when it gets dumped at a place, it decomposes, or in this case, it rots. Now, while this rotting process is happening, what's also happening is, since, as we talked about, creation of plastic being synthetic in nature and all chemicals, so the decomposition leads to release of toxic materials, one in the form of toxic gases, right? And the other is, while something is dumped into the ground, now there's obviously, water, moisture, rainfall. Now all those chemicals then also leach into the soil. Now what happens is, whatever got released as toxic gases are leading to air pollution, and the chemicals leaching into the ground are actually degrading the soil quality, which means that it will make the area surrounding that particular landfill unfit for growing anything. And what eventually happens is, when microplastics and toxic chemicals get trapped in the soil, they also leach into the groundwater, which eventually means that these toxic chemicals will also find their way in water streams, eventually harming marine ecosystems. So if we see that, the impact is kind of interrelated, eventually leading to an imbalance in biodiversity.
Yeah. And also, my guess is that all these microplastics are consumed by animals, they're consumed by fish, in turn consumed by us as humans, right? So even if a person's like, we don't care about the environment, you're consuming more and more plastic, which, I'm assuming is not a good thing at all.
Yeah. I mean, an interesting bit I came about, I came across for microplastics was like in a very, linear sense, we think about microplastics being something solid in nature, right? As you say, kind of something, a polyester t-shirt that I wear, right? Over multiple washes, it leads to polymer, which is essentially plastic, right? And what happens is, since it's microplastic, you wouldn't even see it with your naked eyes. And then what happens is, through water sources, it eventually leads to your bigger water bodies, right? Now, this is something which we've probably very commonly come across. But what I recently came across was microplastics being found in the air in the Arctic, which was mind-boggling for me. Now, microplastics, one being found in the air, and that too in the Arctic, was something which was, I was like, I don't even know how it could reach there, right? So, and very interestingly, because I recently got into a rabbit hole of, reading about deep sea and the recent Titanic submersible event happening, right? So I was reading about this person's. So there's this person called Victor Verskovo who has done multiple deep dives. So he's done all the five deeps, and including the Challenger Deep, which is at the Mariana Trench. And he mentioned that in one of his five deeps, he actually found a piece of plastic at a depth where you don't even find life, which was something, again, very mind-boggling.
Yeah. Wow. But wouldn't plastic technically float up, or was it? I'm assuming heavy plastics go down.
Probably.
Um,
Again, I think that is something it seemed like plastic to him. I'm sure they didn't really conduct any research on to kind of confirm, but yeah, I mean, the idea of something reaching that deep down, that is something to be really, I would say, scared of.
So what currently, so do you think, like in India, for example, most of the plastic that we throw into the trash can, where does that end up? That's ending up in landfills.
Yes.
Landfills. I said films twice.
Yeah, that's
So
right. The stats you were mentioning are kind of pretty much relevant for the entire world. The percentages may vary across countries, but that's pretty much the case, because recycling has its own challenges, and it's obviously not the cleanest way in itself. But yeah, I mean, the easiest way to get rid of trash is to kind of not have it in front of your eyes, and it goes in the waste in a landfill.
I read that the other way to treat plastic, so there's recycling, there's landfills, landfills, you just kind of hide it. And then the third is incineration, which is, from my understanding, soil of plastic. But from what I've read, that's not particularly environment friendly either, because that releases a lot of toxic waste, right? So what kind of is the process for incinerating or for disposing these plastics? And what kind of chemicals? I'm assuming they release greenhouse gases, but can you tell us a bit more
Yeah,
about that?
incineration essentially is, I'd say, probably the easiest way. Again, this comes from, I would say, my limited knowledge. Uh, is the easiest way to get rid of plastic, right? Like, you burn something, and honestly, you see that happening around you, where roadsides people will be burning any plastic waste they have. Like, they wouldn't specifically be burning plastic waste, but they'll probably have a mass of waste which will also have plastic, so they will not really segregate it. And that's because of lack of awareness about what it leads to in terms of the kind of emissions. And since you mentioned about emissions, right, it's not just greenhouse gases, it's a lot of other toxic gases also, I would say. While I'm not sure about what are the concentrations of different gases, but I've read somewhere that some of those particular toxic gases are also considered to be carcinogenic. I mean, incineration is probably one of the worst ways of disposing plastic.
I don't know if there's policies around in India. Are there policies which says you're not allowed to burn, plastic?
I wouldn't be the best person to answer that question, but you do have pollution control board, right? So they do have policies around the what, how, and what not to do. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there are policies around it, but how well they are actually implemented is something I may not be the best person to answer, honestly. I mean, based on what I see around, I don't see any specific, nobody, I haven't really come across, people being penalized specifically.
So to kind of, start to wrap up and to end or to start pivoting to a more optimistic note, what are some small things? And I know that large change happens at the large scale with institutions and large companies, but as individuals seeing this, what are some things that people can do? For example, like I recently read about, actually I was talking to my parents about this, but like painting the ceilings, or not ceilings, but the roofs of buildings, right? If you paint them white or a lighter color, they absorb less heat, reflect more heat, versus if it's a darker color, which most of the time our roofs are, it absorbs more heat. In fact, it in a way contributes to climate change in a way you wouldn't think, because it's absorbing heat, you're absorbing more temperature, increasing the temperature of the earth. What are some small things, not necessarily that, but that people, consumers can do, that you think, does make a difference in the larger scale?
Instead of being all preachy about what people should do, I'll probably talk about it in a way of, so the idea is to make your lifestyle as sustainable as possible. Now, obviously, it starts with the smallest of things. So I'll probably share certain changes I have made in my lifestyle, right, which I personally feel are very low effort, or like minimal effort, essentially. So to begin with, right, like the one that is most talked about is essentially carrying your own reusable bags to when you're doing your groceries, right? So that is something everybody's heard about. Secondly, what I have recently done is switch to alternatives of daily use items. When I say daily use items, I mean toothbrushes, toothpaste. So now you have a lot of easily available and inexpensive bamboo brushes. So essentially what happens is, if you were to use a doctor generally advises you to change your brush 3 months, right? So essentially you will be using 4 toothbrushes in a year. Then, I mean, and if you know that the entire handle of a brush is all plastic, including the bristles. So this is a very easy switch where you can choose to move to a bamboo brush, which essentially will decompose much faster, right? And without leading to any release of toxic chemicals. And similarly, a toothpaste, right? A toothpaste comes in a thick toothpaste tube. Once you use it, there's no way you can reuse it. There's an alternative in the market now, again, more easily available now, comparative to, the last few years, are toothpaste tablets.
Yeah.
So essentially, they're as good as, applying toothpaste on your brush. Just chew one tablet and it kind of foams and you can start brushing your teeth. So what happens is they come in glass jars, and once you have them, you just have to keep adding, or rather replacing your tablets, instead of getting those glass jars again and again. So that is one way of reducing plastic from your daily consumption. Then what I've recently also done is I've switched to alternatives when it comes to cleaning agents. When I say cleaning agents, when you say, for example, you have your dishwasher or a floor cleaner, right? So there are multiple brands available in India now, so which offer options of refilling. So what you do is, whatever extra bottles you have, you kind of go to their stores, or they also do online deliveries. They will send you the material without, liquid. It will be in a solidified form, say pellets.
Water. I saw like an ad about this recently.
Yeah. So it is a dual benefit, right? One, they are non-toxic, so they have kind of reformulated the whole cleaning agent industry that way, I would say, because a lot of otherwise traditional cleaning agents have a lot of toxins in them as well, which again comes from the fact that most of us don't read labels properly. They clearly state all the chemicals it has, and eventually, again, it also leads to water bodies. So that was the first benefit. And the second benefit is, of course, you are avoiding all those plastic bottles in which the traditional cleaning agents come. And this also applies to your shampoos. So now you have shampoo and conditioner bars instead of bottles. And then there's options of buying naked bars. What I mean by naked bars is essentially the soaps that you use to wash yourself. They wouldn't be covered in any plastic or paper. They can, they'll just come as normal bars without any packaging. Or, the packaging will be from an old newspaper, which is kind of getting reused. Another easy switch is, what I have started doing is I carry my water bottle everywhere I go, so that I don't have to use any of those plastic bottles, be it events, be it me just stepping out. And if at all, I feel like buying coffee on the go, I would carry my own mug instead of taking those paper cups, right? Because even paper cups aren't really sustainable options. Another thing that, I think very basic is to segregate your waste, keeping all the dry and wet waste separately, because I think in a lot of places now, at the municipal level, this happens. So it's just easier. So if the segregation of waste happens right from the source, which is our homes, it makes it much easier at the subsequent steps. So I think these are the few things that people can do with minimal effort. Another thing that to add, a lot of while since I was talking about segregating waste, right? Most of our trash bags are again plastic.
Yeah.
But there are alternatives in the market now which have trash bags made of cornstarch. So that is, easy to decompose. I mean, happy to share a few brand names for people to kind of, go out and check out. So for the trash bags, I think there's this brand called Beco, BECO. Then for refills in Bombay, there's this company called Refillable. In Gurgaon, where I am, I use products from a company called Arani Eco, ARANIECO. And then I think there's other brands like Coco Cust. I think all of this is available at a Google search away. And I think summing this all up is, I think, one larger thing which may not be easier to implement at once, but this should be, I would say, a goal to achieve for everybody is to, limit consumption. Because at the very heart of the entire problem is our love for overconsumption, be it food, fashion, gadgets, right? We always want what's in trend, right? So we forget about what we already had. So the idea is to think while you're making your next buy. Every time you feel like buying something new, maybe just stop and think, do you really need it? Of course, you not saying that don't indulge. Of course, you need to indulge once in a while. But the idea is to be kind of reach a level where you are consuming mindfully. So that's all I would have to say.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of the awakening call was I moved cities about 2-3 years ago. And when I moved to my new apartment, everything I ordered online because it was during the pandemic. And so even stuff like my detergent, my light bulbs, like every single thing I ordered on Amazon. And then and I have a small apartment, and within that first week when I started unpacking, I realized I had maybe like 1/4 of my apartment dedicated to my things, and the rest of it was all the packaging that it came in, whether that's cardboard, or it was just so many plastics. Because what we don't realize is you order toothpaste on Amazon, it comes in a paper, like a cardboard box, but then it comes with those like inflatable pillows, the plastic pillows, and then more plastic packaging. And so one thing I have done is that luckily I stay near some stores where you kind of get everything. I have a grocery store near me, and it's not near me, it's like a 15-minute walk, but I have a grocery store, I have a convenience store. And so anything that I can find there, it's like a rule that I'll just pick up from there. So whether that's basic groceries or like the basic necessities like toothpaste, toothbrush, right, I'm gonna get there. And then my online shopping is for stuff that's not accessible to me or that's not in my regular walking zone. I mean, I don't know how much that changes the needle, but to me that's doing a lot, right? And one other small thing I do is I actually don't use plastic trash bags at all. I end up collecting a lot of paper packets anyways, so I just use them as my trash bag. So I'll have my my trash container, which is of metal, and then inside I just dump in a paper bag, which is anyways going to go in the trash in some form or another, and then I use it to collect all my waste. It's a much cheaper alternative, and it's also obviously a much better alternative. I'm not buying these paper bags. It's just stuff that I'm getting when I shop, or sometimes when I'm ordering stuff online. So I try to do that as much as possible. Yeah, and hopefully the more and more people do it, the better it gets, right?
Yeah.
For people that are in cities with public transport, like I don't think people realize the impact that it has. But I mean, sometimes when I'm standing in Delhi traffic, right, the amount of pollution around cars, and you realize that that every single car is actually contributing to this. So if you can using public transport, I think that helps as well. But it's a bit more of a lifestyle change that I don't think people adapt to as easily as these small things like you said, water bottles and trash bags and toothpaste and all these small steps. And I think right now, because these are some sort of novelty, right, it's unfortunate, but if you were to think about typical demand and supply and pricing theory, people are incentivized to buy the plastic and bad. But hopefully with time, right, as we show more encouragement and we continue to show interest in these products, and as they become more widely available and there's more research done, hopefully that pricing disparity will reduce as well. But I think in time we should think of it as an investment for our future.
Yeah. Just to add to what you just said, right? I think what happens is a lot of people are not taking these actions. Rather, the lack of inaction is not conscious. It's just that people like you and me who actively try to reduce waste or reduce plastic usage are always looking at our purchase decisions from a particular lens of avoiding waste. Whereas, as I was, say, a few years ago, I was just, going ahead, making a purchase without even thinking of what the potential carbon footprint of the entire purchase cycle could look like. So it's more of, I think, to do with lack of awareness in terms of what our actions lead to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. Sayesha, thank you so much. Let's wait for 1 minute, but thank you so much.
Thanks for having
me. Of course, anytime. And everyone should definitely check out all the resources that you published about if anybody is like me and doesn't know much about climate, it's a great way to learn. So I got a question. How long a single pad can be used? So I'm assuming that means how long can you use a pad? Usually you change it two times a day or 3 times a day. But then when you throw it, like we said, like it stays in the environment, right? If it's going into a landfill, if it's a plastic regular pad, it's staying in the environment for about 600 to 700 years. If you are using a compostable, completely natural sanitary pad, I tend to almost use it a little bit, like I tend to change a little bit more, so instead of, like I'd say about like maybe one extra time. And that's like a personal preference just because you don't have that plastic. So I prefer just from a hygiene perspective to change it more frequently. But I can do that without feeling guilty because we're still helping in a lot of ways. So I think that's what the question was. Okay, if I'm going to go ahead and add this to our channel as a permanent post. If anybody has any questions, feel free to add it on the comments over there. But Sayesha, thank you so much for speaking. Hopefully, and good luck with everything that you're doing. And hopefully we can be of help at Saathi. And if we can, please let us know.
And I think after I got introduced to Saathi, I'm more than excited to follow your journey with Saathi and Saathi's journey as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Gaurav, as well, for thinking this was an informative session. I'm glad people found this useful. And hopefully I'll see you soon, Sayesha.
See you, Ria. Bye-bye.
Signing.